Some weeks on the horror calendar build themselves around one perfect seasonal mood. This one smells like damp pine, old cabins, gasoline, cheap beer, chlorinated water, melting wax, dusty comic shop shelves, and ancient tombs someone absolutely should have left sealed. Tonight we've got a killer small-town comic debut, a glossy wax museum nightmare, the movie that made every summer camp feel dangerous, and a modern game that remembers why abandoned attractions are terrible places to explore. Then, after the break, we're heading deeper into the woods for a cult slasher that should have been a much bigger hit than it was. So, check the cabin door, stay with the group, and if the lake suddenly goes quiet, maybe that's your cue to leave. Welcome back to This Week in Horror History, your weekly time machine through the creepiest anniversaries in film, TV, books, games, and beyond. I'm your host, Enrique Couto, and tonight we're talking about May 4th through the 10th. Coming up, a killer comic book debut arrives in Buckaroo, Oregon. Wax mannequins get mean in the 2000s. Crystal Lake makes a blood-soaked entrance, and a modern retro horror game proves old-school survival horror dread is alive and well. Then, right after the break, our deep-cut spotlight heads to Camp Stonewater for one of the grimiest slashers of the early 80s. May 7th, 2014, Image Comics drops Nailbiter #1, and modern horror comics get one of the nastiest small-town hooks of the decade. Joshua Williamson and Mike Henderson introduce Buckaroo, Oregon, a place that somehow produced 16 of the world's most infamous serial killers. The series mixes crime procedural, conspiracy mystery, splattery unease, and a little Twin Peaks weirdness filtered through a gas station paperback rack from hell. The beauty is that the town itself feels like the monster. Every road, diner, basement, and front porch might be hiding the next awful answer. As far as where to check out this comic book, Image Comics still hosts the series page and first issue entry with digital availability through Kindle or Comixology and collected editions from Image at major booksellers. So basically, give it a Google and I'm sure you can find it in digital or printed on some dead trees. May 6th, 2005. House of Wax opens, and honestly, this one keeps aging better than the jokes people made about it around the time. On a $40 million budget, it grossed about $68.8 million worldwide. A respectable studio slasher for the era, with a great title, a nasty streak, and a killer central location. Jaume Colette Serra turns that wax town setup into a tactile nightmare. Sticky heat, fake smiles, collapsing bodies, and enough texture that you can practically feel the paraffin in your teeth. I only saw this film a little while back when my buddy Dave brought it to me. While it's supposedly a remake of House of Wax, that's really only in name. In fact, the film felt almost more like a tourist trap remake. If you know that classic slasher from the 1970s, it's one of my favorites. I enjoyed how House of Wax handled pretty much every element of being a tourist trappy town, the teens being stalked. I did dig it, and I've said this on the show before, these early 2000s horror movies are just aging very well, and House of Wax is certainly one of them, although the one element I just I couldn't get behind, even though I thought it was very creative and very clever, was the idea, the big reveal, hey, the movie's over 20 years old, so I'm going to spoil this part, that the house is made literally out of wax. That just doesn't make any sense to me because, like, what? Is this town incapable of a sunny day? Has there never been a summer that was over 91 degrees? But otherwise, I really like it. It's good, dumb fun. And we all can use a little good, dumb fun from time to time. So if you want to check out House of Wax from 2005, whether it's for the first time or as a revisit, it is free to watch with ads on Tubi. And of course, you can rent or buy it on Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. May 9th, 1980, the Big Mama Friday the 13th hits theaters and kicks open the cabin door for an entire era. Produced for around $550,000, it grossed around $39.8 million domestic and roughly $59.8 million worldwide. The kind of return that tells every producer in town, get me 10 more of these by summer. The franchise would become more associated with Jason, but of course the original codified the slasher playbook. Isolated camp, horny counselors, point-of-view stalking, kill reveals, and of course, that final jump. I know a lot of people say the original Friday the 13th doesn't really hold up. It is slower paced. It does have more of a whodunit mystery vibe, which I actually think benefits it greatly compared to other slasher films. And it was produced to be basically a Halloween knockoff, although instead of ripping off Halloween and eating up some of its market share, it ended up expanding the subgenre of slasher movies in a way that nobody could have ever imagined, ever. I like the original Friday the 13th. I think it does stand up pretty well. Yeah, it's a little slow, but what do you want? But the thing that always fascinated me the most was Friday the 13th. Of the big three original slasher movies, if we don't count Texas Chainsaw in it, just because Chainsaw is a different animal, one I love, but a different animal, if we compare Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street, all back to back, which I did once at the drive-in, one thing that really shocked me was Friday the 13th had a much more kind of rough aesthetic. It had more of a regional feel. It felt like it was a lower budget movie where a bunch of people just kind of came together and made it. I mean, Kevin Bacon aside. When I watched Friday the 13th, it looked like a kind of grainy, low budget movie. Then I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, which had a much bigger budget, and it looked a lot bigger budget. And then when I watched Halloween, I was like, wow, this thing had half the budget of Friday the 13th, and it looks amazing because, well, Dean Cundy is kind of a wizard and he shot Halloween. Anyway, I'm getting a little overwrought, but I think Friday the 13th is totally worth a watch. If you're used to the fast-paced horror films of today or even yesterday, Friday the 13th might be better in your Sunday afternoon rotation, but I do recommend giving it a rewatch. And if you've never seen it, well, come on, dude, get to it. It's available to watch on Paramount Plus with your subscription, and you can, of course, rent it on Fandango at Home, Apple TV, and Prime Video. May 9th, 2024. Crow County launches for Windows, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series XS, bringing old-school survival horror tension into the modern indie spotlight. This is one of the coolest recent horror throwbacks because it doesn't just borrow the look of early survival horror. It understands the rhythm, fixed-ish perspectives, deliberate puzzles, inventory management, eerie quiet, and an abandoned amusement park full of kitsch, rot, nostalgia, and wrongness. If that sounds like a spooky fun time for you in your living room in the dark, it's available on Steam, the PlayStation Store, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch, so Give it a play and see if you can survive. Tomorrow on Weekly Spooky, a summer job that sounds almost too good to be true becomes something far worse than hard labor. 3 broke teenagers, 1 strange man with a rusted-out truck, a secretive shed, a half-built house made from handmade concrete blocks, dyed a cheerful, sickening shade of pink. Frank Chopsky says he's building a surprise for his wife and 6 children. A little pink house, something sweet, something sentimental, something made with love. But Frank is not the kind of man you ask too many questions. He keeps the shed locked. He screams if anyone gets too close. He carries in garbage bags, tools, towels, a saw, a hatchet. And every evening he sends the boys across the field with blocks so heavy they can barely lift him. Then one of the boys makes a joke he shouldn't have made. And when the sun goes down, curiosity leads the others back to the worksite, where the pink concrete begins to reveal what Frank has really been mixing inside. Tomorrow, step onto the property, stay away from the shed, and pray you never have to find out what gives a house good bones. On Concrete Evidence by Gary D. up in Ontario. Tomorrow on Weekly Spooky. So make sure you're subscribed. All right, Spookies, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're heading to another summer camp because this week apparently loves to hate counselors for a movie that got buried in the slasher pileup back then and became a cult favorite years later. Garden shears, campfire trauma, one unforgettable raft massacre. When we come back. We're back. Let's go where the campfire story gets a body count. On May 8th, 1981, The Burning opens. And if Friday the 13th is one of the blueprints, well, The Burning is one of the great what-if stories of early slasher history. On paper, it had everything. Cropsey, a scarred camp caretaker out for revenge, based very much on Long Island and Staten Island folklore, Tom Savini on effects, Rick Wakeman on the score, and a grimy upstate camp atmosphere that still feels tactile. Yet it hit an oversaturated slasher market and sputtered theatrically. That's right, the slasher market barely existed 4 years, and it was already so saturated that a nasty little gem like The Burning could get lost in the shuffle. It's a cult classic now, but an underperformer then. Variety reported an early take of about $270,000. The commonly cited budget was around $1.5 million. A bit high during that boom, but not impossible to imagine. Once you watch it, you understand why, ironically, it survived. The woods feel huge, the kids feel like kids, and the violence lands with that ugly practical effects force that makes you wince. The raft sequence alone bought this movie a permanent place in horror memory. It is a doozy, and you'll never think about your fingers the same way. It also works as a bridge title in camp slasher history. Camp is not just where the killer happens to be. Camp is the trap. Cabins, trees, water, campfire stories, and the prank that went too far, plus a very surprising and enjoyable feature film debut for Jason Alexander, who would go on to play, of all people, George Costanza on Seinfeld. If you've never went to camp in this way, I highly recommend you do. It's free to watch with ads on Tubi and the Roku channel, as well as MGM Plus with your subscription, or of course you can rent or purchase it on Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. Now let's dive into some horror birthdays. We've got several of my personal favorites and even 2 alumni from John Carpenter's They Live. First up, born on May 5th, 1940, is Lance Henriksen. He played Bishop in Aliens, Frank Black in Millennium, and is just generally one of the genre's all-time great faces. He has an intensity to him that he brings to every role, and he has a fascinating personal story if you ever get a chance to listen to an interview with him. And of course, he was originally supposed to play the Terminator before they discovered Arnold Schwarzenegger. Happy birthday, Lance Henriksen. Born on May 8th, 1954, David Keith. And I just realized something. When I put this together, I thought it was Keith David, but it's David Keith. That's why I made the reference about They Live alumni, because Keith David is in They Live, but David Keith is not. I can't be the only one who makes this mistake. David Keith is unforgettable in Firestarter and a steady presence in supernatural and thriller territory. He's definitely one of those character actors that seems to find himself on this side of the genre spectrum. Happy birthday, David Keith. On May 9th, 1955, Kevin Peter Hall is born, the original Predator performer, and one of the great physical monster actors of all time, standing at a staggering 7 foot 2 inches tall. He was basically built to play monsters, not needing to use stilts or very much in the way of camera tricks. He was in films like Prophecy playing the mutant bear, Without Warning playing the alien. But he didn't only play monsters. He appeared in films and TV series including Night Court, The Dukes of Hazzard, and Big Top Pee-wee. A very happy birthday, Kevin Peter Hall. And finally, born on May 10th, 1948, our actual They Live alumni, Meg Foster, was born. She had those impossibly blue eyes, which you likely noticed in They Live, The Stepfather 2, and many cult films and TV series after that. She always carried a kind of haunting quality, but also elegance, even when she was playing a villain. A very happy birthday to Meg Foster. For our then and now, this week shows horror recycling itself without feeling dead. In 1980 and 1981, camp slashers are rough, opportunistic, and hungry. By 2005, House of Wax turns young people in an isolated nightmare zone into glossy multiplex horror. By 2024, Crow Country translates old survival horror media into something modern players are craving again. And tucked into this same time period, The Mummy shows how a classic horror icon can be rebuilt as a full-blown summer adventure. Still cursed, still undead, just with a bigger grin. And speaking of, that leads into our weekly recommendation. On May 7th, 1999, The Mummy opens in the United States. If this episode leaves you wanting one more pick from this time period in horror, go with The Mummy. The Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz blockbuster that took the country by storm, although I suppose it was more of a sandstorm. Stephen Sommers takes the old Universal monster legacy, bolts it up to pulp adventure, and sends it tearing through cursed tombs, scarab swarms, ancient rituals, doomed treasure hunters, and one very angry resurrected priest. It fits this week because it understands horror as a summer attraction. Like Friday the 13th, House of Wax, The Burning, and even Crow Country, it starts with people walking into places they absolutely should have avoided. Only this time, the danger is waiting under the sand. It grossed more than $400 million worldwide and still has enough creeping, crawling nightmare fuel to earn its place on our calendar. While a lot of people kind of write off The Mummy as being an actionified horror film, I kind of think it works really well because the Mummy films originally were kind of reminiscent of Alan Quatermain, which was basically the stories that became the inspiration for Indiana Jones. So there was always this traveling adventure thing, and I think it fits really well in the Mummy story. So if you want to head to the desert for your own adventure and revisit The Mummy, it's streaming on HBO Max with your subscription as well as Peacock. Well, my spookies, that's your trip through May 4th to the 10th in horror history. Tomorrow, Wednesday, don't forget to check out the brand new terrifying story, Concrete Evidence, right here on the weekly spooky feed. And don't forget, on Monday, we have a brand new Terrifying and True to scare you. You never know what might pop up on Fridays. And on Sunday, well, the unknown broadcast slips in and creeps us all out. But now it's time for me to get back into the calendar and dig something else up for you next week. So, stay safe and maybe don't go to camp this summer unless you really want a thrill. I'm your host Enrique Couto reminding you, our days are numbered, because that's how we tell them apart. See you next week.